something to say.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Project Shadow episode number 558. Agent Carter, Supergirl Gets Her Man. Hello, I'm Eric, and I am the host of Project Shadow, the voice of Project Shadow, the guy who writes everything over there. Yeah, hi. I'm sorry I didn't get an episode out yesterday, but like I told you on the last episode, we were going to a food tasting for our restaurant that we own, and I didn't know if I'd be back in time to get another episode out yesterday, and no, we weren't. And I have to say, the food tasting was rather disappointing. I learned two things that I never thought I would learn. Number one, there is such a thing as bad bacon, and two, there really can be too much bacon. Yeah. So we walk into the place, and I was expecting them to have all manner of things that we could try, from exotic meats to exotic cheeses to exotic vegetables and fruits and whatnot, as well as your standard, hey, why don't you carry this and just throw it into the deep fryer that your restaurant doesn't have? Because we refuse to get a deep fryer for the restaurant, because we don't deep fry food at our restaurant. Yeah. That's actually not what we saw when we got there. It was, hey, why don't you buy our cold brew coffee? Because I know you don't know what cold brew coffee is, and we make a special cold brew coffee. And I had to explain to the poor man, yeah, we've been making our own cold brew for a while and selling it because people like me, I like cold brew coffee better, and we're just trying to get the market to understand what it is. So yeah, that was rather behind the curve. But yeah, okay, so we go into the next table, and guess what? They had a specialty bacon. You know what was special about this bacon? It was just bacon. That's it. Bacon. Nothing added to it. Next table, they had bacon. Yeah, more bacon. And, they had smoked bacon, apple smoked bacon, smoky smoked bacon. I think I'm kidding with that. Pepper smoked bacon. Every naffing table had a specialty bacon. And the ones that didn't had, and I kid you not, a bacon aioli, because, bacon fat plus eggs equals aioli. But they'll make it for you, because, you're lazy. And one table had a bacon burger, where they actually just, I had to break it to them that it wasn't really a bacon burger. They just took, pork belly and ground it into a burger. And yeah, that was not successful. They shouldn't have. No. I've actually had things like that worked, but theirs really didn't. And then we go to the next table. Oh wow, they have a turkey burger. Okay, what's special about your turkey burger? We grind bacon into it. Oh. So it's a bacon and turkey burger. Okay. Every table was bacon. Except for, a couple. There was one that was showing us exotic vegetables like asparagus and spinach. By the way, that's also the one that had the bacon aioli. It was insane. It was, so much bacon, and so much of it was really bad. Not exactly what I expected. We've been to these tastings before. They usually have interesting things, but this year apparently everybody's out of ideas. It's just, how can we make bacon taste bad? Which is a really hard thing to do, but believe me, people, they have found a way. So be warned. There's a possibility that really bad bacon is coming your way. Hopefully not. Hopefully you will be spared. Hopefully people like me had to taste the really bad bacon, so people like you will be able to have your happy memories of when bacon was amazing and couldn't be bad no matter what. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, that was my day yesterday. So I'm sorry I didn't get an episode out, but I told you I might not be able to, and unfortunately that turned out to be true. I was also thinking of doing a video from there, but yeah, yeah, it was just too depressing. No. I actually debated whether I was going to talk about it on the show today, but I thought an explanation for where yesterday's episode went, it might be fun. And yeah, bacon was actually in my nightmares last night because there was just so much of it. So here we are today on Book Watch day number 240. Yes, it's been 240 days since I began work on the latest sci-fi book, and it's actually coming along a little bit better. Hopefully I'll have more to share with you later in this Book Watch segment, but I thought I would just introduce this because, I don't know, it's funny. Book Watch day 240. Yeah, there's a lot going on with this book. It's going to be a big one. And what the sad thing is? I've only written a little bit of it. I've been spending most of my time figuring out backstory and setting elements because I really want to make sure I get everything right. Yeah, more about that on the way. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's show, only thing I saw interesting in the news today, it looks like they're trying to cast a Superman for the upcoming CBS Supergirl pilot. This is interesting for two reasons. Number one, Supergirl, as I understand it, is going to be happening within the Arrowverse. As I understand what's going on, both Supergirl and Vixen are going to be part of the Arrowverse with Arrow and Flash and the possible Atom spinoff and maybe, some of the other shows that might get spun off from there. So that kind of surprised me. Now, Flash has made references to Bruce Wayne, so the assumption is that Batman does exist in the Arrowverse. I figured since they were going to put Supergirl in, that Superman also existed, but there was part of me that was hoping that we were kind of going for an Earth 2 thing, because, you have the movies coming out, and the movies and the TV shows are, unlike the Marvel stuff, are not going to be crossing the streams. They're not crossing over. So, from my perspective, I was hoping that they would do like they do with the comics, where you have the Earth 1 storyline, where everything's kind of interconnected and doing its thing. Then you have the Earth 2 stories, where one of the most brilliant things that they did was issue 1 of Earth 2, they killed off Wonder Woman, Superman, and Batman, and you have slightly modified origin stories for the rest of the superheroes, and they go forward in a world without Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. That made for a very interesting read because you don't have the Deus Ex Machina that you can just throw into the setting of, oh, and Superman shows up and beats it with his fists. Or they couldn't figure out the problem, and then Batman showed up with his brilliant detective mind, figured it out. They are the Deus Ex Machina of the DC Universe, and so it was a really interesting thing to have them just kind of, oh, by the way, they're dead. On with the story! And I was while I didn't expect them to do a Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman are dead thing for the Arrowverse, I was kind of hoping that they would just do it, they don't exist. Because Gotham is not part of the Arrowverse, which I think is a good thing. Not really a big fan of that show. I might try it out. I noticed that they're doing some stuff with Red Hood, and I want to like it, but it's just not happening at all. But anywho, since that's not, connected, I didn't expect them to make any Batman references, so I was surprised when they did. I am rather surprised that they're going to do a Superman. I'm wondering... See, this is based off of a casting call. I have to explain this rumor. It's based off of a casting call where they're looking for somebody who's an actor who's 5'11" or taller and ripped. And the assumption is they're doing that because they're going to cast a Superman to be in the pilot, at least, of the Supergirl TV show. That description is not necessarily Superman, so maybe that's not what they're doing. I would love to see Superman completely not exist in this setting, just like I love the fact that we have Ferris Air mentioned in Arrow several times, and even mentioned in Flash once. I would love to see them go the way of having John Diggle become the Green Lantern for the TV franchise. I think he basically has John Stewart's backstory already, so you could just give it to him. And they have announced that they're in talks with DC to let them do that, so yay! That's really exciting. But hopefully, they're not going to be doing this Superman thing. And we'll see. I have high hopes for it, even though it isn't a CBS show. I have high hopes for it just because, as I understand things, and my understanding may be wrong, which is, if it is, please let me know, that Greg Berlanti is going to be part of the production team that's going to make this show happen, like he is with Arrow and Flash. And Greg Berlanti, I've been a fan of his for a very long time. I think he can do almost no wrong when it comes to superheroes. So I'm excited to see what they're going to do. I am concerned about how they're going to limit the TV shows that they're doing if they're going to introduce the idea that Superman exists. Because if Superman exists in this universe, there's always going to be that nagging question in the back of your mind when something really, really bad's going on. Because they're working towards a Justice League or Justice Society for the series. I mean, we've had Firestar, we have had Atom, Katana has been on the show. We're introducing more and more superheroes. If there is a huge world catastrophe that actually causes them to do a Justice League thing for the TV machine, the question's just going to be hanging out there, well, where's Superman? And I think it would be better if they didn't have one in the setting, because then that wouldn't be a question. But that's just me. Yeah. I am excited about this show, though. I think that they could do some interesting stuff with it as long as they don't get sexist. That's my biggest concern, is that they're going to get a little sexist with Supergirl, because, well, let's face it, that's kind of where Supergirl has been off and on. But if she's like the Supergirl that was in the Justice League animated series that Paul Dini did, that would be awesome. So, now we are entering the spoiler zone. For the rest of the episode, I will be talking about the last episode of Agent Carter and everything that led up to it. And I will probably say some things that will be spoilery, including the very end surprise and what have you. So if you have not watched Agent Carter and you are averse to having things spoiled for you, you might want to check out the end of this episode later, because that's what I'm going to be talking about. So, the final episode of Agent Carter has aired, Valediction, which means endings. And the first thing I have to say is, I want a full series out of the show. Agent Carter has been such a breath of fresh air for me on TV. Peggy Carter is such an amazing character that, I want to see more of Haley Atwell. I want to see more of Haley Atwell. I want to see more of Haley Atwell. I'm really excited to see her name on the poster for the upcoming Avengers Age of Ultron, because that's more Haley Atwell. I want more, I want more, I want more, I want more. And in full disclosure, as I'm recording this podcast, I'm wearing one of my Agent Carter shirts. So, big fan, want more. For those of you who are still listening, who haven't seen the show, Agent Carter is about Agent Peggy Carter, which you would remember from, hopefully, having seen Captain America Winter Soldier, and I believe she's referenced in the first Avengers movie as well. Peggy Carter was a founding member of S.H.I.E.L.D. She's actually been mentioned on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show and actually had a few cameos on that as well. She and Howard Stark essentially created S.H.I.E.L.D. And she was involved with Project Rebirth. They gave us Captain America, and Captain America is the love of her life. Giving her her own show set after Captain America, after World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, I think was a very brave decision. and it was one that, for me at least, paid off. The show has been so entertaining. The relationship between her and Edwin Jarvis, sorry, was just so, I don't know, the two of them together, they had that kind of Holmes-Watson thing going on, but in such a strange way. It's hard to explain if you haven't seen their on-screen chemistry with each other, and they worked really, really well. I like that the show took on the attitudes of sexism that existed in the 1950s in America, especially as women were being forced out of the workplace so that the men returning from war could have a job. That was a very interesting thing that they did on the series, especially nowadays, when we tend to pretend that sexism is a thing that doesn't happen anymore, even though it really does. But, I mean, not as bad, but it's still around. Trust me, I live in an area where we deal with that a little bit more than we should. Many of the other characters on the show were really good. Daniel Sousa, played by Enver Jokaj. If you don't know who I'm talking about, he was one of the main actors on Dollhouse, and he was a character that I just fell in love with. There was something about him that was interesting, not fully explored, which is one of the other reasons why this show needs a full series. He was smart. He was injured somehow during World War II, though we're not really given an explanation as to what happened to his leg. And he was a very refreshing kind of character to have on the show, in that he was the counterpoint to the male sexism that you saw in The Office Place. This season being about Leviathan, which, while I do hope if they get another series, Leviathan is not going to be the enemy again, I would like Leviathan to stay out there, kind of like Hydra, as a threat, because that's what it was. In the comics, Leviathan was essentially the Soviet version of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the way that they played with that on the show was interesting, especially with the character that we meet initially as Dr. Fenhoff, who we learn is Dr. Ivchenko. He was a fascinating villain. I'm interested. I loved what they did with him throughout the series, but the series was just way too short. I know it was a mini-series that they put up to fit in the gap between Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. going on hiatus and it coming back. It's kind of a backdoor test to see if something like this could happen, but the season was way too short to really go into the characters to the full depth that they needed. The relationship between Peggy and Dottie, for example, is something that I would love to see a lot more of, especially given how the series ended. Okay, so a little bit about validation. What did I think about valediction? I actually liked the way that they summed up the series, starting like they did with the radio play of Captain America, which I have to say I found those really entertaining, because I'm a fan of a lot of radio drama, and I've heard some of the Captain America radio dramas, and they're actually kind of like that. Yeah, I really like that they kind of started with that, and if we don't get another series, another season, then this was a really good bookend in a lot of ways that helped fill out Peggy Carter as a very interesting character and her relationship with Howard Stark. What's even more interesting was giving Howard, like they did, his own, I hate to say this because it's his son, but, in chronology of everything being released, his own Tony Stark moment, where he realizes that everything that he's ever done created death. And he felt that Steve Rogers in Project Rebirth was the one good thing that he did. That moment made me think back to the original Iron Man movie, where Tony is wondering if Howard, if his father, ever questioned what they were doing with Stark Industries and making the weapons and everything. And to see him go through that and have a very different reaction. his reaction wasn't Tony Stark's reaction, well, I'm going to get my weapons back, I'm going to become a superhero, blah, 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 blah. Howard Stark's reaction, I mean, he did do some of that, but that was all off camera. Howard's reaction was much more emotional, and it was the one thing that Ivchenko used against him to try to get him to destroy New York. And this idea that Steve Rogers was his redemption, that Steve Rogers was his salvation, was such a powerful idea for me. And, it also brought up that moment in Avengers where Tony Stark meets Captain America for the first time and says, "You're the guy my dad wouldn't shut up talking about." And that really meant something for me, because seeing how much of a hero Captain America had become in Howard Stark's mind, that Howard Stark had helped create this ultimate force for good as a counterpoint for all of the darkness and destruction that he had brought into the world through his weapons manufacturing. I almost want to see, a short with Howard Stark telling a story to young Tony, because I really want to know what those stories were, because he seems to idolize Steve Rogers so much. I would love to know what exactly those stories were. How did he get mentioned around the house? Was he kind of the good guy boogeyman, be more like Steve Rogers, or what? It made me think about that and those dynamics of family, and how does someone like Howard Stark, and especially the Howard Stark that we met in this series and on the TV and on the Captain America movie, how did he end up with a child? Like, I understand how he could have kids, like busloads and busloads and busloads of kids, because Howard Stark has a superpower, and it's the seduction of women. I mean, that is his superpower. So I understand how he could have kids, plural, like by the busload, trainload, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids scattered throughout the planet. But how did he end up raising one? I really kind of want that story, because I feel like that is a gap in the Howard Stark that we've met so far that I can't wrap my head around. Exactly what happened, who was Tony Stark's mother, and how did that come to pass that Howard Stark decided to raise a child? I think that we started seeing that psychological change in him, where where Jarvis is telling us that he has decided to destroy his most dangerous creations, rather than do what he had done previously at the beginning of the series, which was put them in storage, and of course they got stolen. So we see him kind of psychologically maturing, and I would love to see more of that, because he's still very puerile by the end of the series, and something had to happen in him that would make him adult enough to want to actually have and raise a child. I don't really want to talk about the action too much, because I don't think that that's what made this show great for me. It was the characters, and that's why I'm spending a lot of time talking about them. I mean, Peggy Carter's moment, all throughout this, while she's trying to save Howard's life, while she's trying to save New York, that conversation that she's having with him over the radio, and her finally kind of letting Steve go. And that was amazing to me, because the symmetry, it was so beautifully written, the symmetry of that conversation with Howard Stark and her last conversation with Steve Rogers. Sitting in the room with the radio, knowing that at any moment he'll never talk again, because he'll probably be dead. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful bit of symmetry there in her story, and seeing her through this be able to not only help Howard Stark, but to kind of let go of Captain Rogers. That was a very powerful moment for me, because it was this lingering thing in her character. I think we've all, in one way or another, lost someone that we really, really loved, and if friend, family, lover, what have you, and it's really hard to let go of that, and to have her have to go through that trauma all over again, where there's her friend Howard Stark, and he's not in exactly the same situation that Steve Rogers was, but in a similar situation, and the risk of losing him too. And in losing Howard, she would lose Jarvis, because if Jarvis had to shoot Howard's plane down, I mean, can you imagine what that would do to his psyche? It was a powerful moment on TV for me, and one that resonated very strong with me. I loved it. And I would like to see more of that wonderful, that powerful, that moving character moment where you see her, telling him that he has to let go of the memory of Steve Rogers while she herself is letting go of it. It was breathtaking. It was wonderful. It makes the entire series even more worth watching, because the payoff, instead of doing the cheap thing, and I don't mean by production costs, I mean the easy thing of just giving us a big boom, ending, having it be such an emotional touchstone, to have it be such a character-driven moment on the show, that was a risk on the behalf of the producers and the writers, and for me it was one that really, really paid off. And it paid off doubly in that at the end of the season, when we see at the end of the episode, when we see Jack taking credit in front of the senator for everything that Peggy did. Everything that Peggy did. And so getting so mad about it that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to tell that senator and I'm going to tell Truman himself if I have to. And Peggy just having that wonderful moment, in contrast to some of the things that we saw earlier, that wonderful moment of growth where she's like, my worth isn't dependent on what people think about me. I know my own worth. That was such a glorious moment in the show. I know my own worth. And may we all learn how to say that and mean it. That was beauty. Just sheer and utter beauty. And I'm getting kind of chills just thinking about it right now. I mean, it powerful. Then, of course, there's the end of the episode, which it requires a sequel. It requires more. I need another season, because with Dottie and Peggy moving into one of Howard Stark's many, 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 many apartments, and Dottie's enthusiasm about it, and I need more. I'm going to try to stop saying that and just talk about the episode, but I need more. And then that final touching moment where Jarvis gives Peggy that vial of Captain America's blood and explains to her that he's giving it to her because he doesn't think anybody, even Howard Stark, could be trusted to do the right thing with it. And he's probably right. But then to see Peggy pouring that vial of blood into the river. I mean, I don't know. Sorry for the silence there. There really is no words for it. It was such a perfect moment, because this was the last thing that she had that was Steve Rogers. This was his very life's blood. The blood of the man that she loved more than anything. And that she would love more than anyone else in her life. And seeing her pour that vial of blood into the river at the end of the episode. It was one of those perfect TV moments. You don't get a lot of them, but it was so beautiful. It was such a touching moment, because this is the moment that she needed the entire season. This was the moment that she needed ever since Steve's plane went down. This was the moment that she could finally let go and be at peace with what happened. It was the moment that she needed, and in some ways, it was the moment that we needed. It was one of those rare things on television, that cathartic moment of letting go of the past so that you can embrace whatever the future brings you. I mean, such an amazing thing. And to me, they have to be setting up a second season. And I had a long argument with Johan and Brian about this last night, because at the very end of the episode, when we see Dr. Ivchenko in his torturous, makes everything that they ever put on Hannibal Lecter look humane face mask to keep him from being able to speak, get put in the same cell with Zola. And having Zola start asking questions about how he was able to do the things that he did. And knowing that, like we do from Winter Soldier, that Zola is going to find a way out of prison to be a consultant inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. To build... It was one of those moments where you see the Hydra plot starting, that Zola is going to do something. And Brian really felt that what Zola was learning there was the techniques that would go into Project Insight, which was a big part of the plot of Winter Soldier. And yes, the amount of psychological knowledge that he could have learned from Ivchenko, yeah, I could see that helping be part of what would be the process for, the profiling that Project Insight used to figure out who it was going to shoot. But there's so much more that he could have done with that knowledge if he could learn how to manipulate people to the same degree that Ivchenko was able to do. I don't know. I feel like there's a story there, that they're setting up a second season with Zola as the villain, or Zola being a distraction villain or something. You know what I'm saying? That Zola, I don't know. You have this brilliant mastermind who can hypnotize anybody and get anybody to do what he wants, and the only thing that you're going to do with that knowledge is Project Insight, like 70 years later. I don't buy that for a second. Zola has something in mind. Zola is plotting something. We know that he gets out of prison. We know that he becomes an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., kind of, sort of, consultant thingy. There's a story there, and I want it on my TV machine. And hopefully we'll get that. As of this recording, I have heard absolutely nothing as to whether or not they're going to be renewing Agent Carter. I hope they will. Even if it's for another mini-series next year in this same time slot, in the during the hiatus for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I really want another season, and hopefully we'll get that. Let me know what you thought about this episode. I'd really like to know what you thought about this episode in this series, because I have not fallen in love with the TV series in the same way that I have with Agent Carter in a long time. And this is a show that I hope gets a lot more, and I would love to know what you guys think about it. So let me know. Send me an email, eric@dashpunk.com, or you can contact me through any of the social media sites, or leave a comment over at the Project Shadow agenda or on the show notes over at projectshadow.com. Anywhere you can find me, leave me a comment, and I will get back to you, because I'd love to know what you think. Next week, I can't wait for the return of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and hopefully maybe learning what Raina is. It's a big question in my mind. Tomorrow, hopefully for tomorrow's show, we will be talking about Arrow, unless something else comes up that's just so pressing I have to talk about it. I have not seen Nanda Parbat yet, because we watched these in a group, and the group's going over tonight. We're going to be watching Nanda Parbat tonight, so I can't wait to find out what happens, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow, and anything else that's in the news. One of the things that I'm going to try differently from now on is, after I finish recording the show, which means probably before any of you get to hear it, I want to be posting a link on our social site, over our community site over at projectshadowagenda.com, and I'm going to push that out to Twitter and Facebook and ask you for suggestions and stuff for the next episode, for episode 559, to see what you guys want, so you have a kind of a catch-all place to start submitting things. And I think I'm going to start posting that immediately after recording, or maybe after I push publish. I don't know. We'll see. But let me know what you guys think, what you want on the new show, on the next episode, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about Arrow tomorrow. Anyway, it's been fun. Bye.